Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for all coming today to the Zoom webinar. My name is Lucas Cowan. I'm the Director and Curator of Public Art for the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. I just want to start, before we get into the crux of this conversation and some of the beautiful work that we're going to be talking about tonight, I just have a few housekeeping items before we begin. This presentation will be recorded and made available afterwards on the Greenway website. I want to say thank you to Melissa Lowe and to Vanessa Wu for their translation services this evening. Also, I just wanted to say attending this evening is Christine Mouillet from Sampan News and Kate Meyer from the Boston University, who are reporting on this exhibit and webinar. If you need interpretation services in Cantonese and or Mandarin, both are available. Just simply click the globe at the bottom of the screen and select the Chinese flag for Cantonese or the German flag for Mandarin. Unfortunately, Zoom does not provide more specific options, so our apologies for the inaccuracies in the flag button language options. We will be leaving time at the end for Q&A, and if you submitted a question ahead of time, thank you so much, and we'll work to address those later on in the program. If you'd like to submit a question now, we'd love to hear from you, and you can use the Q&A function on your menu to type the questions. So since we have a few attendees from far and wide today, currently we've got about over 100 people today on this webinar at this point, I'm going to briefly just give an orientation of the Rose Kennedy Greenway. So the Greenway is a 1.5 mile park running between Chinatown and the North End in downtown Boston. The reason the park is linear and right downtown is that it is the site where it used to be the elevated highway or the central artery, as you can see in our before picture on your screen. As part of the Big Dig project, a tunnel was built underground for the highway system. And here's the after picture showing the new green space. The Greenway opened in 2008 as the Big Dig was wrapping up and sits atop the I-93 tunnel. Although downtown is currently pretty subdued due to COVID, the Greenway is typically full of activity. We usually have over 400 free events annually, custom carousel. We were the first food truck and the first beer garden in the city of Boston, and also includes a variety of lush gardens and spaces, contemporary public art, water features, and it's just really an amazing place for you to come and learn and be. And to learn more, please visit our website, rosekennedygreenway.org. I work for the Greenway Conservancy, the nonprofit that is responsible for the management and care of the Greenway. And since this model is a little unusual in Massachusetts, I'll just point out that we are on state land. The Greenway is actually owned by the state, which is leased to our nonprofit, the Conservancy, by MassDOT. And we have total operating control. So our nonprofit has a full horticultural and maintenance staff, in addition to programs, art, development, and admin staff. Collectively at the Greenway, we envision a vibrant, inclusive, and evolving gathering place that ultimately raises the standards of excellence for urban park management. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now that housekeeping's out of the way, thank you for joining us to learn about Lantern Stories, which is an installation that's located in Boston's Chinatown on the Greenway in Shin Park by Boston-based artist Yu-Wen Wu, who will be joining us later on in the program. All Greenway public art is funded exclusively through competitive grants and private sources. This specific installation received support from the Barr Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New England Foundation of the Arts, Mabel Louise Riley Foundation, the TD Charitable Foundation, and Robert and Doris Gordon. The lanterns and the installation itself are lit daily from 4 p.m. to 7 a.m. and will be on display through November 19th. And again, it's located in Shin Park on the Greenway in Chinatown. Tonight, artist Yu-Wen Wu is going to share a few stories of the lanterns and to highlight the many complex narratives captured in this artwork. If you'd like to learn more about each of the stories of the lanterns individually, there is a comprehensive catalog available on the Conservancy website through blogs and our artist pages. Additionally, if you want to learn more about the process of creating the lanterns that Yu-Wen did, or collecting the community input for part of the design and structures of the lanterns, the Conservancy hosted a webinar a few months ago covering this information, and the recording of that webinar is available on our website as well. And we'll be sharing these resources with a full recording of tonight's webinar following tonight's event. So to kind of start this out, we are premiering for the first time today a small documentary, about a 5 or 9 minute documentary that Yu-Wen Wu created in connection with this installation, Lantern Stories, to really talk about her process as an artist, as well as the fabrication and the installation in Chinatown. So we're going to watch that first, and then we're going to see another video, and then we're going to move into conversation. So please post any of your questions that may arise to you in the chat. And again, as we said, we'll have more time at the end for some questions. And just a side note, some viewers may experience minor or temporary lags depending on your internet connection. And as we stated, an HD version of the short film will also be made available after this live event. We'll also be sharing on our social media channels, so be sure to follow the Greenway and share. So thanks again for joining us tonight and for spending some time with us. And we hope you enjoy, and I will see you in about 9 minutes.
Lantern, Boston's vibrant Chinatown community. I created 31 lanterns to illuminate the district's history of immigration, its culture, and its resiliency. I am grateful to the Greenway Conservancy for commissioning this work. The iconic symbol of the lanterns represent light and guide the way forward, illuminating surrounding darkness. From the humble beginnings as a lantern flame, surrounded by bamboo, silk, or paper, the lantern has become an integral part of celebrations that foster hope and pave the way to a brighter future. As a child growing up in Taiwan, lanterns were a source of delight and magic for me. I remember vividly that during certain occasions, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival, lanterns lit homes in Taipei. I hope to capture that feeling of transporting the viewer to another place and time through this artwork. I began this public artwork with ideas that this would be a place of joy, of reflection, of remembering past histories and creating new memories. It's a place to gather community and encourage civic dialogue. Within the open plaza of Chin Park, the installation would be a sweeping gesture incorporating the sky, the urban landscape, and the constant motion of city life. I spent many hours in the park, watching the interactions of the neighborhood, the visitors, and the passerby. As part of my public art practice, I listened to the community where the art will live. As I spoke to residents and community leaders, it became clear that the history of Chinese immigration and of Boston's Chinatown needed to be shared. A community listening session was held at the Powell Arts Center. Hosted as an open public platform, the Greenway Conservancy team and I invited Chinatown residents, community leaders, organizations, and businesses to share family history, current issues facing Chinatown, and their hopes for the future of Chinatown. There is a lantern devoted to community voices. This project asks how we reflect and commemorate our histories in a public act. The Chinese Historical Society of New England's archived photographs of Boston's Chinatown were incorporated into many of the lanterns and storytelling templates that I created to wrap around the lanterns. This public artwork was created with the hope that each lantern initiates the desire to learn more about the long and fraught history of Chinese immigration to the United States, from early arrivals during the California Gold Rush in the 1850s to these unprecedented times, and about the inequities faced on multiple levels by Asian Americans. from activism to entrepreneurship, from family to education to the arts. The images share chapters of this community's history. I worked with the talented team of fabricators at Jaywalk Studios. We created prototypes from my concepts and drawings for the installation. Boston's unpredictable weather guided many decisions, from materials selected for the outdoors to engineering design. Jaywalk was able to take my vision for lantern stories and help bring it to life from fabrication to installation.
I think one of the most beautiful things about Yu-Wen Wu's work, Lantern Stories, is that it does for public art what public art is supposed to do. It is able to be engaging, it is about community, it is about participation, it's about the future, it's about the present and the past. She's been able to react to what's happening socially and locally and address this within her work. We've been working on this work, Lantern Stories, for over a year and a half, and it's gone through a couple of different iterations. And again, public art at its best, it's here for the present to tell us exactly what we are doing at the present time. And Lantern Stories addresses this specifically.
Boston's Chinatown has a deep and rich history. One of the most exciting aspects of this project was meeting people who saw their neighborhood, their home, or a family member in the archival photos I used on some of the lanterns. I'm so appreciative of the many narratives emerging from this project. It has become a living history. I hope to continue recording these stories.
Looking up at the pictures, I noticed a few pictures that came to mind when I was a little girl. One being Clifford Wong's dad, which was an herbal store / grocery store, and they used to make fresh killed chicken and poached chicken, and I would, as a little girl, I would buy poached chicken from that store and bring it up to my grandfather who lived on Oxford Street.
After a while, the restaurants weren't wildly popular at that time in the 1930s, but we did do laundry tickets. My father had custom-made machinery adapted so it could print the laundry tickets, and the customers wanted big numbers on the laundry tickets. So my father had custom machines made.
I grew up in this row house at 116 Hudson Street from 1951 to 1962. It was a close-knit community of the first Taiwanese immigrants allowed to settle in America after the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act. My home was demolished to build the Southeast Expressway in 1963. This action evicted 100 families, including mine. I can remember each and every person who lived in each apartment and all the love that I felt growing up in my neighborhood. I'm thrilled to see it all alit again up on this lantern shining in this park.
I deeply appreciate the individual stories generously shared with me, the struggles and the many contributions immigrants have made to this community and to make Boston's Chinatown what it is today. Lantern Stories evolved during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. As anti-Asian sentiments rose and as events were unfolding across the country that further fueled the Black Lives Matter movement, Lantern Stories was able to pivot and examine not only the past but current events as well. I designed this installation to be expansive and can be reimagined in different forms, in different site locations, and incorporating regional stories and current events. It is my hope that Lantern Stories will offer opportunities for civic dialogue and simply the pleasure and joy of experiencing the beauty of lanterns lit from within during these challenging times.
Fantastic, Yu-Wen. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that video and your process. And I hoped everyone at home enjoyed kind of seeing the behind the scenes aspect of what it took to kind of create this installation. It's public art is no longer just a single artist sitting in a studio by themselves creating and installing. This really did take a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of collaboration. So very exciting, Yu-Wen. Thank you. Up next, we're actually going to watch one more video and then move into conversation with Yu-Wen. This next video that you're going to see is different from Yu-Wen's documentary video documenting her process. This video is about the stories of the individual 31 lanterns that Yu-Wen created, really diving into the specific thematics that she was curating and creating around. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that first video. Here's a second, and I look forward to our conversation after this, Yu-Wen. So thank you so much.
Lantern Story celebrates Boston, Chinatown's vibrant community. The 31 lanterns hung like an open canopy in Chin Park on the Greenway illuminates the long and fraught history of Chinese immigration in the United States. It celebrates the culture and the resiliency of this community. The stories of Boston's Chinatown are grounded in a collective history. These range from the histories of immigration and systemic racism that many Chinese immigrants faced, to the development of Boston's Chinatown as an ethnic enclave for Asian immigrants to form a community in this country. From early Chinese immigrant labor in the California Gold Rush and Transcontinental Railroad to the row houses that were homes to immigrant families in Boston's Chinatown, the lanterns, like the community, are grounded in histories of immigration, family, neighborhood, and the struggles to be resilient. One lantern in particular examines the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act and the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. Due to extreme negative sentiments by white communities that felt threatened by the Chinese laborers immigrating in the mid-1880s, the U.S. government banned immigration from China with the Chinese Exclusion Act. To this day, it is the only U.S. law ever implemented to ban the immigration of a specific ethnic or national group. The act was repealed in 1943, reopening immigration and permitting Chinese settlers to apply for citizenship. Such systemic acts of racism coupled with personal and daily struggles with xenophobia drove Chinese Americans to build their own ethnic enclaves or Chinatowns across the country. Boston's Chinatown has consistently been under threat. Numerous pressures from anti-Asian sentiments to displacement and more have created a strong history of grassroots efforts in Boston's Chinatown. Multiple lanterns share these stories as residents and community members have long fought to ensure this cultural hub can survive and thrive for generations. One of the few two-tier lanterns in the installation looks closely at Boston Chinatown's history of displacement and protest. The bottom lantern memorializes the 700 Hudson Street homes, which were demolished in the 1950s West End Urban Renewal Project, causing the displacement of 2,700 Chinese and other immigrant families. Also demolished was the Scully Square Red Light District, causing its residents to relocate in and around the neighborhood district of Chinatown. In 1974, the Boston Redevelopment Authority designated this new concentration of adult entertainment as its official red light district, called the Combat Zone. Expanding into Chinatown, the Combat Zone saw increasing sex work, drug use, and crime into the 1980s, limiting the housing and business opportunities of Chinatown's immigrant population and disrupting the formerly family neighborhood. Pictured are Chinatown residents in the 1980s engaging in peaceful protests to halt the Combat Zone's encroachment into their longtime home. Displacement remains a major issue in the gentrification of modern-day Chinatown. In a contrasting moment of triumph, efforts led by Chinatown residents, the bottom lantern's center photograph shows Governor Herter signing a Chinatown-led petition to reroute the 1954 Century Artery Highway project to Chinatown's perimeter rather than through its center. This effectively saved community institutions and many homes from demolition. Since Chinatown's early days, many organizations have stepped up to fight for immigrant and workers' rights, affordable housing, and resident priorities. Acknowledging how activism has continued to shape our community and world, I decided to create a lantern responsive to current events. Today, the term Chinese virus is the latest brand of xenophobia and sinophobia amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Fight the virus, not the people, is a protest cry, and an attempt to dispel the resulting harassment, prejudice, and violence for Asian individuals of every descent, and to focus on productive means of combating the virus. Additionally, I found it important to acknowledge the social justice movement that today has centered on the fight for Black life. Acknowledging the events of this year and the prevalence of anti-Black sentiments, it was important to state that Asian American activism is in line with and in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. The 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act was influenced in no small part by the Civil Rights Movement. Another theme explored in multiple lanterns is entrepreneurship. In a discriminatory and exclusionary market where signs of no Chinaman need apply, early male Chinese immigrants arriving in the 1850s found a needed industry niche in the laundry business. Laws and policies allowed Asian men to only do what is considered traditionally women's work: cooking, laundry, serving, and washing dishes. By the early 20th century, hundreds of Chinese-owned laundries lined the streets of Boston and its suburbs. Once wives and children were able to immigrate to the United States, increasingly after the 1924 and the end of the Chinese Exclusion Act, laundry establishments became operated by entire families. As Boston's Chinatown became more settled, many new to Chinatown quickly identified the thriving food scene as a staple to the community's economic success. From restaurants and cafes and bakeries to grocery stores, small local businesses feature numerous and distinct culinary options, but the legacy of entrepreneurship goes far beyond food. Originally, the fastest and most effective means of spreading news and engagement among the earliest settlers of Chinatown was through street-accessible bulletin boards. Boston's major Chinese bulletin board at the corner of Oxford and Beach Street was dismantled in 1991, and since then, increasingly popular Chinese-language newspapers carry news for Greater Boston's residents. Pictured here is 10-year-old Jeffrey Wong helping his father at the Shanghai Printing Company. In an interview, he tells me that with 7,000 characters lined along the wall in a particular Chinese dictionary system, it was important to put the typesets back for the next set of printing. Many lanterns within Lantern Stories feature artworks created by artists that both delve into the community narratives of Boston's Chinatown, but also express the culture and concepts of the community. From a lantern which features dancer Lenora Lee to Boston artist Win Tizhen and his Hometown series, to calligraphy and a migration map, the arts hold meaning and provide expression for the community. The art of calligraphy is an important part of Chinese culture and education. It translates literally to way or method or law of writing, and historically was considered one of the ultimate forms of artistic expression, along with painting and poetry. Contributing to the lanterns are 3 Boston-based calligraphers, Maurice Chi, Peter Eng, and Mike May. One lantern shares a portion of a classic poem from Quiet Night Thinking by Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai. This poem is about the feeling of missing one's hometown in a quiet, moonlit night. This lantern translates to I raise my eyes to the moon, looking down, I think of home. Maurice Chi wrote this in the style of script which was used as long as 10,000 years ago. The character for moon, for example, is symbolized by the top center crescent shape. These pictograms are the building blocks for the more complex and contemporary Chinese characters. Another lantern holds one of my drawings called Mapping Migration. This drawing charts the global migration pattern of 2018. Historically, the United States has provided the opportunity for a new life for immigrants who flee from war, persecution, and economic hardships, and towards opportunity and the idea of the American dream. A community is made up of many facets, but it's held together by the people who live there. Many lanterns show images of everyday life and reflect shared cultural references. One lantern features my drawing of the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. These animals are used to represent each of the 12 years in the zodiac cycle, and depending on one's birth year, are believed to inform one's personality, fortune, and compatibility with others, among further traits. Additionally, the entwined plants of bamboo, lotus, chrysanthemum, pine tree, and peach all signify different qualities. The lion is a frequent animal subject in Chinese myths and is a symbol of power, wisdom, and promise. Traditional Chinese lion dances are performed during Chinese New Year festivals and other occasions to pray for good fortune and prosperity for the coming year and to deflect the interference of evil spirits. The dance is influenced by martial arts and performed in a wide variety of styles by two or more dancers who share a lion costume, accompanied by a raging rhythm of drums, cymbals, and gongs. On the occasion of the coronavirus pandemic, these lions wear masks to show their commitment to the safety and health of both themselves and others. 3 lanterns, one a single and another a double lantern, focuses on identity. I felt it was important to offer an opportunity, in this case to youths, to express how they see themselves, whether as new immigrants or native born, and share their family neighborhood stories through drawing and photographs. 27 youths participated. One of the processes of my public art practice is to listen to the community where the art will live. In gathering stories, issues, concerns, one lantern is dedicated to sharing statements from the community. Express their sentiments such as, "It's my hometown. I belong here. I am proud because I am the 3rd generation." To me, this is a very unique place that nurtured me. And I hope that Chinatown is able to develop and grow in a way that allows families to live, work, and play in Chinatown. I had the pleasure of speaking to Amy Chin Gwyn. A fascinating history. Amy Chin is the oldest of 6 Chin children. Born in Boston, she and her siblings lived for a period of time in China. Amy's daughter Terry writes, "Because of their education and as bilingual speakers, they could understand the needs of both American-born and immigrant Chinese. As American citizens, they could organize on behalf of disadvantaged non-English speaking residents, elders, and neighbors of Chinese descent without the fear of deportation." This statement sums up how immigrants have helped each other and support their community's resiliency. This project touches only the tip of the iceberg on so many important topics to the Asian community. Lantern Stories was created with the hope that each lantern initiates the desire to learn more about the history of Chinese and Asian immigration to the United States, about the cultures and traditions of these immigrants, and to reflect on the issues of injustices and inequities throughout history and in these current times. Thank you for listening and for hearing some of these lantern stories.
Wow. It's so exciting to hear all of that. There's so much more I know that went into those works, but to get that brief kind of overview is always wonderful. So congratulations, Yu-Wen. I would like to officially welcome Yu-Wen Wu to the conversation. Yu-Wen is an interdisciplinary artist living and working in Boston. She was born in Taipei, Taiwan, and her subjectivity as an immigrant is central to her artwork. Arriving at an early age, her experiences have shaped her work in areas of migration that examine issues of displacement, arrival, assimilation, and the shape of identity in a new country. At the crossroads of art, science, politics, and social issues, her wide range of projects include large-scale drawings, site-specific video, installations, community-engaged practice, and public art. So welcome, Yu-Wen. To start us off, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to thank you.
Oh,
Warm introduction. And I'm so pleased to be sharing this time with everyone.
Fabulous. Well, I know we're getting some questions in from the audience, so thank you so much. Please feel free to continue to type questions in the Q&A. But I'm actually going to kind of start this off, actually, Yu-Wen, with, one of the things that was as part of the last video specifically, and one area that I think is very topical is the idea of displacement and protest, right? It's extremely relevant in today's political and social climate, and there seems to be a never-ending struggle, be it space, profit, civil rights, or xenophobia. And I think it's important to not look at these issues also, as only Boston issues, but areas of concern globally. So these issues are not the easiest to address, obviously. We look to artists a lot to help us with solving these issues. But I want to ask you, what was your thinking and process like in addressing these really kind of global concerns?
Well, I'm going to step back a little bit and just say that I've always felt that art has the capacity to take on large issues. Artists are lenses, they're mirrors, they reflect the culture and sometimes the present of the future. We absorb what's happening around us and to us, absorbing the current times, and that are really sometimes very deeply personal. But that often represents a larger collective. It's not an isolated landing. So I agree with you that there is a never-ending struggle for space and profit and civil rights or xenophobia. Art can just raise these critical awareness in the ongoing struggles for social justice and civil rights. So when I address through my work the issues and concerns and lifetime interests, it's what resonates for me. And migration, immigration, displacement is all part of a personal history. The conversations around assimilation, hybridity, cultural identity in a new country, and the positions in this society being Asian American are all part of my experience. And actually, I believe that many of these experiences are present for all displaced persons. Quite evident in another project that's called Leaving Some Belongings, which is currently being shown at Site Santa Fe in New Mexico. So in a public artwork, however temporary, it should speak to the site and to the community that it lives in. The process is research, and in my case, notebooks of drawings that find this place in the project that feels right. The process is testing materials, seeing how they can express the concerns I want to address in this particular project. And the process is to listen to the community where the work will reside. So in Lantern Stories, and because the commission was for a light-based artwork, I thought about how light illuminates and reveals. And with the onset of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, it seemed like the perfect project to reflect on the politics and social climate at this time. And there's an interesting juxtaposition, I feel, of a familiar iconic object as your first experience. But then when when you get closer and you look carefully at each one, it's embedded with issues in unexpected ways. So I hope they raise the consciousness of prior and current events.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, this work draws upon so many that have also come before you, like in the art world, right, too. You know, throughout history, I think artists, you know, in very specific political unrest moments, you know, have used issues such as civil rights in their work and through different mediums, right? And, you know, I pull up this slide specifically because, you know, the work of David Wojnarowicz in dealing with the AIDS crisis and being at the forefront, even when saying being gay or AIDS wasn't even spoken, right? To be a leader out there talking about these issues, to, you know, Barbara Kruger addressing cultural constructions of power and identity, consumerism and sexuality, and as a woman in the 60s and 70s doing this, you know, writ large in public spaces. I think, you know, you could not pay attention to this work, you know, and to even, you know, Hank Willis Thomas dealing with identity, history, and popular culture and mixing those together, and his you know, truth booth that is very community based and is culling stories from community to talk about what their, you know, truths are at that moment in time, and whether that's about love or marriage or that's about politics, right? It gives it a platform for conversation. And I think, you know, Mark de Suvero's Peace Tower is also very similar. I see it very similar in regards to your work. And for those of you who don't know who Mark de Suvero is, you know, Mark de Suvero is considered one of the grandfathers of abstract expressionist sculpture. And in the 60s, the late 60s, around the Vietnam War time, he and a couple of other artists created a piece that was called Peace Tower. That was to symbolize this idea of peace and bringing the arts, using the arts as the forefront to talk about these major issues that weren't being talked about or were being swept under the rug, and invited, you know, over 400 other artists to create reactionary work to this that created an entire installation, right? So it was also culled from the community at the same time. So I do think that, you know, and then also Jenny Holzer as well too, whose main focus of work, you know, is on the delivery of words and ideas in public spaces, speaking of violence and oppression, sexuality, feminism, power, war, and death, you know, on these utilitarian objects such as billboards in Times Square, right?
Right.
And, you know, the use of your lanterns, I think, in one, speaking about the history, two, speaking about activism, three, about, you know, the cultural issues and connections to Black Lives Matter and Asian Lives Matter and, you know, fight the virus, you know, and the bias, right? You know, those are all, you know, powerful ways to use, say, a lantern, which is considered a utilitarian object in a lot of ways, right? As a medium that also, you know, sparks curiosity. And so I think the way in which your installation in Chin Park in Chinatown, you know, there is a piece for everybody right there, right? You know, if you want to go there to be reflective, if you want to go there to see these just beautiful objects as they are, right? Because they are beautiful objects. Or to go there and have critical discourse about some of the issues that you've raised within the thematics. I think it's a really just, I congratulate you again. I know we worked together for over 1.5 years on this piece. And to see it come to full fruition in the midst of a pandemic, mind you, I could not be more pleased for you, and I hope that the community feels the same in that way. But, you know, I think the other aspect that I want to kind of talk about with this work too is one of the, you know, before COVID hit and even still now, you know, memorials and monuments exist, whether there's a pandemic or not, right? And I think memorials and monuments are extremely top of mind, you know, not only in Boston. I mean, Boston has over 75 historic bronzes. You know, Christopher Columbus was just dismantled and moved, and, you know, Hank Willis Thomas is doing a big piece on Martin Luther King and Curator, Scott King. You know, those monuments, memorials, you know, are usually commemoration about one specific event, right? But I really think that the way things are going to move forward in the future, especially in these national conversations, or maybe even global conversations, is around shared histories and stories. And that not one person or one individual made this historic event, right? It takes the people that are not spoken of sometimes, that are seen as below, right? the voice that rises. And so, you know, I think, again, with your piece, the way in which you curated and conceptualized and built through curated conversations with individuals and business owners and within the community and with the visitor and students, you know, new generations coming up, you know, you've allowed this kind of living monument to and memorial to exist. And as I think you've said also in a lot of your other, as you said before in your video and your documentation as well too, you know, that it's a collective whole. It's for everyone, and this can change, right? This can be added to. And I think that's so important that, you know, it's important to tell the history of location. It's important to use the history of space and site and place keeping as opposed to place making, right? And, you know, these, where your installation sits, you know, normally would be a lantern installation by, say, the community that's there too, right? The elevation of this and actually really bringing it, I think, with the community voice in mind is so important. So I don't know if you have anything you want to react to in regards to what I said. I spoke a lot there.
That's great. Yeah, I was reflecting back on what you said about monuments and memorials, for instance, and you know, it made me think about this quote from James Young in his book, The Texture of Memory. It's a book about the Holocaust, but he made a point between memorial and monument that stays with me. He said that monuments are to always remember versus memorials are to never forget. And I think that Lantern Story endeavors to always remember and hopes to never forget. So can it be a temporary monument and memorial? Because as a society, our memories are proven to be short. We don't remember the history that brought us here and those that should not be forgotten. And so in Lantern Stories, I felt that it was a shared history and the histories of all the immigrants before us. It's a collective history and a collective memory. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we need to come up with a new word, right? Maybe it's not monument, maybe it's not memorial, but I think maybe that should also be part of a larger conversation in the field, right? Because I think also too, you know, so often monuments and memorials, especially in public art programs, get swept under the heading of public art, right? When in some cases they're not about public art, right? And you know, this as a living archive, right? You know, as a living history, as a monument and a memorial, it may need its own term. And so that's something that maybe we can think about moving forward as we discuss this. So, you know, I think the other thing that I wanted to kind of address, you know, within this work and just in general in regards to public art, you know, I've been in the public art field now for 18 years and have worked in cities such as Chicago and Baltimore and Boston and other cities from across the world and have, you know, been a contractor for many other public art spaces. And, you know, one of the things that I've seen through these years is the way in which sometimes public art is perceived sometimes as a less than art form, right? It's not specifically an indoor museum, hang on the wall, alone, siloed in your studio, sometimes working on one specific thing. You know, public art takes many tools to create, right? And, you know, this idea of, you know, the tools that you used to talk to the community, right? The tools that you used in working with the fabricators, the tools that you had to use in working with, you know, general politics and trying to get this, you know, working to get this installation installed at the same time. I think as an artist and public artist specifically, you know, public art isn't seen as its own medium sometimes, right? And, you know, I think it's really important to talk about public art as a tool, as a medium, just as a painter uses a brush on a canvas and paints and oil. Public art is made up of many wholes, right? Not just a single aspect or one specific idea from an artist. There is a multi-layered process with it. And I just wondered if you had any words that you'd like to speak in regards to that, as that is a part of your main practice as a public artist.
Yeah, I come from a studio practice, and I think of all my public work existing in concept and execution within and without four walls.
Mhm.
So for me, public art is just another medium and an extension in which I can convey ideas and implement, projects and artworks. So I think of my standards as quite high, and therefore the execution of my outdoor public art has to meet the criteria as best as possible within the constraints of materials to withstand weather, for instance, and engineering requirements, and the site and the community which it lives. So I guess ultimately both has to be transformative to be successful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I think there is a misconception that all public art is also community-based art, right? At the same
Right.
time. I think, in working with the community, and yes, in some programs it is, right? And simulations, but I do think that in public art, specifically and around this project as well too, the community was just as much of a medium, right? They were collaborators in helping to mix those colors, right? To paint this broad stroke of their narratives and their histories as well too, that you are helping to interpret. But in a way, it is just in a great way, the community is a medium as well too. But public art, again, I just want to kind of iterate again, I think public art does have a different level in part because it's outdoors and it is for community quite a bit. So I want to say thank you so much for elevating public art in a way that really does both, right? So thank you. It looks like we're getting a lot of questions, so I just want to make sure we get to some of those questions. So I'm going to throw some questions at you, Yu-Wen, from the audience. So we have a question from Barbara that states, "What happens to these beautiful lanterns on nights like tonight when it rains?"
They're constructed to withstand the weather, the snow, the ice, the rain. They're absolutely fine. And yeah, I've tested this. We've tested this material.
Yeah,
so
had a year and a half to do it, right?
exactly, under all conditions.
And actually, someone has a really interesting question. They didn't give their name, but they asked, "Are the lanterns in chronological order on the Greenway?"
No, they're not. They're kind of scattered throughout so that you have to explore and put the stories together yourself, because each individual lantern has its own story. And I think it's this community of stories that links everything together. So yeah, it's almost much nicer for you to encounter them surprisingly on your own. Yeah.
Inquisitive minds, you got to go out there and have that conversation, right?
Right.
A couple people have actually asked, and we may have touched a little bit on this, but how long was the whole process? Could you give maybe a little more timeline of your work on this project?
Yeah, I think I started really looking at the site very carefully around August, because I think we started this commission came about maybe around June. Is that right, Lucas? Of last year. And so by the time August came around, I really could be involved in many of the community activities. There's a film festival at the end of August. And then of course there's the Lantern Festival in September. And so all these engagements gave me a chance to see how the space was used, including no festivals, including just passersby going, through this park. And then I started sketching.
Yeah, which are beautiful. They're right behind you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And throughout the fall, that was the time I really tried to engage in, residents, businesses, and just tried to talk in neighborhoods and just the neighborhood, and just tried to talk to people, including the passerby, of how this park could mean to them.
Yeah.
And then came around February, we did the listening session in very early February. And then at that time, and then when the lockdown came about in, was it March, right? Around mid-March?
March 12th.
Yeah, right, mid-March, right. We put this project on hold for a little while because we weren't sure it was going to move forward.
Yes.
But during that time, I was still prototyping and testing out all these ways to how this project would come forward. And because of COVID and the Black Lives Matter movements that was coming about, all the events, it just, it became really clear what this project would shape into.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Yeah, we got, I mean, like there's a ton of questions. So I apologize we can't get to all of them, but we will answer them and post them separately after this as well too. We had a question from Selena who asked, what has the public reaction been to the lantern installation? Was this different for Asians versus non-Asians? Has your work had the intended outcome?
I have to say one of the most gratifying things is to hear from residents that of their stories of their families and or of their neighbors or of about the neighborhood. And I really do feel like this is a project that can continue to record this period of history that's really important, because that too will pass if we don't do it now. In terms of responses, I feel like the community, the Chinese community, the Chinatown community has been really amazing and really responsive to this. I feel like if you want to say it's the non-Asian community, there's been different responses. Some of which is, this is great. I didn't know about the 1882 Exclusion Act. So this is something I want to delve into and I want to know. And as well as communities of color that have said, wow, you know, we really need to have this discussion with the Chinatown community here as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're getting, I mean, I know people are very excited about this because there's multiple questions asking the same question in regards to what happens to the lanterns after November 19th. Rebecca asks, are there any plans to display them anywhere else? There were some other questions about, is this coming back? Will it be possible to view the lanterns close in an exhibit at some point? There's a lot of these questions. So I don't know if you have anything you'd like to speak about in regards to that. I can speak a little bit about it as well.
Yeah,
too.
Lucas, you speak about it.
Sure. So, you know, part of when we were conceiving of this work was to have it as part of a lot of the festivals that were going to be happening also in Shin Park, you know, in partnership with Main Street and the Power Arts Center and a few other institutions, organizations, especially during the fall months when a lot of those aspects happen. We decided to still move forward with this installation, whether those festivals were happening or not happening. And we're so glad we did, because we, you know, like all art, you know, and especially because of the museums being closed and because of the aspect that we want to get out, we really thought it was really important to have this installation be installed for people to engage with. You know, people ask a lot, why are we taking it down after 3 months? Well, one, engineering, specifically for New England weather. You know, it was supposed to possibly even snow on tomorrow, right? So there's only a certain amount of snow loads that we can deal with, and so it can't go up through the winter, right? So there's a lot of engineering aspects that kind of go into that. I think the other thing is that we are possibly working to see if we can bring this installation back next year. As we all know, with COVID budgets, it's pretty crazy. But we have heard a lot of comments and we're taking that into consideration. I love this artwork, so we're hoping that we can do that. I know that with UN, we've been trying to work and partner with possibly other institutions to maybe see if there's a chance to see this work in another location, whether that's indoors or outdoors, even temporary. But the lanterns are made. They are in great shape. We are going to store them until we kind of can understand better what is happening next year, even with COVID, or politically even. But our hope is that possibly we can bring these back to the Greenway, and if not to the Greenway, to another location for other communities to also enjoy.
And this project was also conceived so that it can live in other regions and tell other stories. So, you know, perhaps it's another Chinatown, and perhaps it's in a location that's totally not Chinatown. So it's the history, the regional histories and the current histories can all be, you know, retold and yeah, and embraced.
Yeah, and I think that's the beautiful thing about public art again is that it really enhances and changes an environment, right? You're going in there to take something that everybody thinks they know every day, that they walk from A to B, and then you illuminate it literally with these lanterns and these histories and these ideas. And so, you know, this work, as Yu-Wen said, is transcontinental, maybe even. Yu-Wen, there is a question that I want to get to too that says, first they compliment you on what beautiful videos and beautiful artwork, but is there significance to having 31 lanterns? And if what is your favorite lantern or one that resonates with you the most?
Oh boy, it's like you can't say which is your favorite child. You can't do that, right? So I don't have. They're all special, and they're all special because of for different reasons. So I don't have one particular lantern. As a whole, I feel like it's a. I'm really pleased with how it's come together. And no, there is no significance to the 31 lanterns. You'll have to speak to the engineer about that one.
There's certain specific weight loads when you're dealing with
exactly.
And wire and weight capacity. So sometimes our work changes because of the dictation of engineering. So I also want to be very conscious of everyone's time here. As I said, if we haven't gotten to some of your questions, we'll work to get answers to those and post those online as well too. Excuse me. But thank you so much. There's a ton of questions here, Yu-Wen, so people are really engaged with this and want to know more. So
thank you so much.
So I want to say thank you so much, Yu-Wen, for joining us today and for creating this beautiful installation that is so representative of a community and your practice. So I look forward to seeing what comes next with this project and what comes next with your artwork in the future. Yu-Wen has become a very good friend of mine as well too through this process, and that's what I really love about also the curatorial process is really working and collaborating together to create these amazing installations. So just as a reminder again, the lanterns are lit daily from 4 p.m. to 7 a.m. and will be on display through November 19th, located in Shin Park in Chinatown on the Greenway. And if we weren't able to address your questions, please feel free to also email them at info@rosekennedygreenway.org. You can also follow us on social media accounts to learn more about the Conservancy's public art program and everything else we have to offer. Today's program is part of a series of webinars we'll be doing this fall into next spring. So stay tuned for more details coming soon. And I couldn't be remiss without saying, that these are very challenging times, and the Greenway is committed to providing you with a world-class public park, and are so grateful to our Greenway community, from our board members and staff to our volunteers, donors, and to our visitors who visit the park. We'd also like to thank again the Barr Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New England Foundation for the Arts, the Mabel Louise Riley Foundation, TD Charitable Foundation, Robert and Doris Gordon for the support of the Conservancy's public art program, also including Yu-Wen's Lantern Stories. And as many of you know, we are preparing for significant financial challenges ahead. Earned income, which typically makes up a third of our annual budget, will be lower than last year, roughly about 1.25 million, due to lower rent from our food trucks and delayed openings of the Carousel and Beer Gardens. We also had to cancel our biggest fundraising event of the year, our June Gala on the Greenway, but we were lucky enough to get PPP funding, but we still made a significant budget reduction this year and looking ahead to 2021. But we are still so pleased to be able to present the amazing work by artists on the Greenway, such as Yu-Wen Wu, Yinka Shanaberry, Ferran Dai, Super A, Juan Traveso, and Catalina Delgado Trunk. So please come and visit the park, see these works, and be inquisitive towards them. Since 80% of our annual budget comes from private sources, support for the Conservancy is sorely needed. So we appreciate our family supporters more than ever at this time. You can help the Greenway by making a donation and joining our volunteer programming. And with that, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you on the Greenway. Again, Yu-Wen, virtual hugs. I wish we could be there together.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and don't forget, Tuesday, vote.
Exactly, vote.
Fun.
Bye.
Bye.